There we are, live with Bill B in DC, Bill Boyle, and it is 6:26 Eastern, and about 6 o'clock. President Trump, our Mad King, posted on his third-rate social media platform. Congratulations, everyone. It's been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire. And then he went on to say how it's going to work. He explained it. And then he says, I'd like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what we should be called the 12-day war. The 12-day war, a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. God bless Israel. God bless Iran. God bless the Middle East. God bless the United States of America, and God bless the world. He didn't say, Bill Boyle, I love you, God. Good to see you.
I guess their personal relationship is over now. So can I jump right out of the box and say that what is so utterly asinine and ridiculous about that statement is that if the United States had not given Israel the green light to attack Iran last week, none of this would have been necessary at all, because realistically, nothing has actually changed for the better after Israel's attack on Iran. Now, Iran is a super crappy, terrible government. They foment terrorism. They're bad. The Iranian government is. But any government, bad or good, needs to be secure. And any government you're ever going to get from this point forward in Iranian history, its number one priority is going to be to make sure this never happens again. Now, no Iranian government in the foreseeable future is ever going to have the kind of air power that Israel or the United States does. But this Iranian government, what it does have is that the United States hit three major places in Iran that stores highly enriched uranium. Iran had already moved a lot of the highly enriched uranium away.
Maybe.
And near Natanz, for instance, they have another centrifuge factory that wasn't even touched. So Iran has tons of I shouldn't say tons. It has many hundreds of pounds of highly enriched uranium with which it can make nuclear weapons. And that process is a much harder thing to track than the centrifuges that make the highly enriched uranium. So where we are right now is that whatever happens, Iran knows it cannot depend on air power. It can't depend on air defenses. So the only thing that any Iranian government of any stripe going forward is going to need or want is a nuclear deterrent. It's going to be the only thing that's ever going to stop this from happening to them again. And that would be true if you got a liberal democracy in Iran next year. These morons changed the world by doing this in a way that's ultimately going to cut back against our own ability to control things. The other thing that obviously everyone can see now is the limitations of Israeli force. Israel can knock your air force down. It can beat the crap out of your country. But eventually, and probably in the near future, Israel's going to run out of ammunition to continue to do it. And then it's back to square one as far as security goes, or at least square two. Israel can invade Iran. All Iran has to do is endure. And I will tell you, if there's some kind of deal that's happening right now, it's merely a pause. There is no regime change happening. The Iranian government has gotten hit hard, but it's not weaker. It's not weaker than it was last week or the week before in terms of running Iran. And so you're going to have a situation where overtly, or more likely very covertly, Iran is going to now really go for a weapons program, I should say. And they did not have one. Everyone agrees except for Israel that they did not actually have one before last week. We will look in the future and we will see this as the beginning of the Iranian nuclear weapons program. And, what the Iranians have seen is the limitations of what we can hit. They've seen the limitations of how much they can be damaged by American weapons. The reason that we didn't use the Moab and do this through 5 administrations was because everyone was afraid of this sort of result, where Iran now knows what the parameters are, what it can get away with, and what it needs to do to get to a situation where this can never happen to it again.
Why do they want to have a weapon so badly? Why not just stop pursuing a nuclear weapon? And
if they don't get a nuclear weapon, they will never be secure as a country ever again.
Why do they need security? Who is threatening them as a country? If they aren't threatening,
Pakistan's nuclear power on their border on the east. Israel's their nuclear power to the west, who hates them and they hate Israel. The United States is a nuclear power that sits in the Strait of Hormuz right next to them. Russia's a nuclear power just north of them.
You don't think there is a world in which Iran will stop overtly or covertly pursuing a nuclear weapon?
No, I think that Iran and many other countries, because America as a guarantor of peace has given up its role. And if there is no guarantor of peace, in other words, if to some degree the American security blanket and its nuclear umbrella don't protect you, then you have to do it on your own. I mean, Turkey is talking about upping its missile programs. You can bet Japan and South Korea are thinking about it. Indonesia is thinking about it. We have given up our role as at least a sort of sort of fair arbiter and defender of international law. And so everyone's going to cheer that this war is over. This is just the freaking beginning. This broke a bunch of norms and boundaries. And I don't like the Iranian government at all. I think they're awful. The Ayatollahs are terrible. But we just probably kept them in power longer. And we just did it's another shot at the global system that the U.S. set up after World War II that kept things mostly stable. This is going to destabilize things in the long run. Turkey, 100% has got to be thinking about getting nukes now because they don't want to be in a situation where Israel attacks them and they can't have them back.
Why'd you say Israel will run out of ammunition?
This stuff is very munitions heavy to do this to a whole country like Iran. And while Israel knocked out their air power and they hit them on their military stuff and whatever, they weren't close to like shutting down Iran as a functioning society, not even remotely close. To have that kind of air power, I mean, I don't think it really exists, frankly. But to even take a reasonable shot at it takes thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of munitions and tens of thousands of sorties and more pilots and airframes than they have.
They haven't seemed to run out of ammunition to destroy all of Gaza or much of it. I don't know.
It's different. They're just lobbing artillery shells in. That's easier. Mm. These are, precision munitions being fired at military targets.
Going back to last week, this 12-day war, when Benjamin Netanyahu elected to attack Iran, that was a very complex operation with all kinds of planes and missiles and bombs and boots on the ground, actually agents on the ground with drones. Apparently it was elaborate. It seemed to have killed their air defenses, which allowed them to then attack more, including all those nuclear sites. It seems like, is there reporting on this? It certainly seems everybody is saying that Netanyahu, a bad man, convinced another bad man to attack a third bad man regimes. But Netanyahu basically put America in a box and said, we just softened it up. You can now send your bombers, any of your planes, your F-35s and your B-2s in, and they're not even going to get shot at. You're going to look amazing. Is that
that's Bibi? That's Bibi talking smack, frankly.
No, I don't know what happened. I'm just saying that's what it seems like. It kind of the conversation. And you heard Marco Rubio is like, screw the intelligence. It's like basically it seems like it was a conversation between the Israelis and the Americans. A few people, even
it was Bibi and Trump. It was Bibi and Trump, and Bibi was saying, and all the Trump people did initially was to say, okay, we will basically tell the Iranians nothing's going to happen until the talks are over. And then that lulled the Iranians into not hitting their bunkers, which is what allowed the Israelis to kill a bunch of their leadership in the beginning. It was only after it looked good in the first few days that the Trump people started to go, ooh, this looks powerful. And this is Trump himself, frankly. This looks powerful and this looks amazing. So let's get in on it. So none of this is being driven by strategy. This is all just domestic politics in Israel, domestic politics in the United States, a certain amount of legitimate concern about Iran. But they're quite literally saying, forget the intelligence. That's a sentence from the Secretary of State. And Trump said about, Tulsi Gabbard of all people said, hey, there's no evidence that they have a weapons program. Even she said that. And Trump was like, I don't listen to her. Like, this is so clearly driven by the wrong motivations, by totally self-aggrandizing narcissism in our leadership. There's no strategy to this. It's just
when you
utterly appalling, stupid thing.
when you say they didn't, there's no evidence that they had a weapons program. There's
Yes.
plenty of evidence that they had uranium that was enriched at percentages far too high for the use of energy and could be used for a weapon.
Could be used for a weapon. Correct.
Actual
Those are two. Yeah,
now,
those are
program. When you say weapons program, now do they have a missile to put it on, a rocket to put it on, a way payload?
not even.
No, apparently they didn't have that, but they did have uranium that was clearly being enriched for weapons grade.
Well, I would disagree with that, actually.
Oh.
They had very little highly enriched uranium until we tore the JCPOA up, until Trump himself tore up Obama's agreement in 2018. Then they enriched kind of slowly for 3 or 4 years. And then when they realized that the U.S. wasn't listening, then they started enriching a lot more quickly. But they still did it where the IAEA, for the most part, knew where all of it was. Like, they weren't trying to hide it. And what I think that most people who study this stuff would say was, it's a negotiating tactic. It's let's start enriching, because if they're not listening to us and our security is not, we're not seeing any sort of deal on our security that's going to get the attention of the Americans, then let's give ourselves options. One of those options is get more enriched uranium, so that maybe if you really, really have to do it down the road, you have enough for a weapons program. But at minimum, it gets the attention of the U.S. and gives us a bargaining chip with which to negotiate. There's no evidence by anybody. The Israelis claim they have evidence, and they never ever deliver it. There's no evidence that, it's not just putting it on, you don't just take like 10 pounds of highly enriched uranium, smack it on a missile and fire it. A nuclear weapon is a fairly well understood, but it's not a simple thing to make a trigger for an actual nuclear weapon. And you have to then make that trigger, put the uranium in it, and then have it be robust enough that it can be fired off in a missile and not just fall apart on the way or misfire when it gets to where it's going. These things are really precision things, but you don't need like a big production line to do them, right? So here's my point, though. The Iranians, it seems pretty clear, were avoiding doing that. And remember, all of the Ayatollahs who have run the country have said fatwa against building a nuclear weapon, fatwa against using them multiple times, many times. They've never used one. They've never used a dirty bomb. They could do a dirty bomb tomorrow if they wanted to. Never done it, right? So it's an extremist regime, but it's not an irrational one. The Iranians don't want to destroy Israel and then lose Iran. There's no sign of them ever being up for that. And so I just think we treat Iran as if it's like this satanic regime that is uniquely bad in the world. And I think that is basically they're really bad. They're no worse than North Korea. They're no worse than the Soviet Union was. They're no worse than Cuba. And we've dealt with and built trust and verified things with all of those countries to make sure things don't get out of hand. Iran is the exception to that. And it's obviously because of how people feel about Israel, about how Jews feel about the Holocaust, about how the Iranians say totally inflammatory things. But in the end, we're not, if you want to build a better world, you do it by working to build trust, even with people you hate, so that you don't end up in situations like this. Right now, when I've asked a bunch of people who are sort of experts in this field, 3 or 4, to be fair, what would it take for Israel to feel absolutely sure and totally fine and believe there is no nuclear program going on in Iran that might attack them someday? And the answer from everybody who knows Israel is there's no level of knowledge that's going to make them feel secure. On top of which, what would Iran need to feel secure against Israel? There's no level now. There's nothing except maybe a nuclear program. And then if they have a nuclear program, they know they can't be invaded. Then everybody's got to think 10 times before bombing them, etc. So this has been a gigantic failure in every way. And it's people that are Trump and Netanyahu who are getting their kicks on how people are responding on Truth Social.
Well,
and there's no strategy. There's no long-term thinking in this. And the outcomes are going to all be real bad in the end.
All right. Well, a lot of it, I think, would be as a result of internal domestic politics, how this plays at home, which is what I was also going to ask you. A lot of this seems to be about that Netanyahu striking. I mean, let me just go back to, before I get to domestic politics, Iran is a major sponsor of terrorism. Yes.
Yes, although less than people realize. I mean, all those cells in the U.S. that were supposed to be attacking us right now seem to be basically non-existent.
In terms of in the Middle East, in terms of their proxies,
Yep.
the Houthis, and obviously Hezbollah for a long time, in Lebanon forever, not forever, but back to the 80s, right?
Decades, yeah.
They attacked the Marines in 1981, killing like 280 Marines in Beirut. Of course, they've not been a great actor on the stage in the Middle East in terms of what they've sponsored. They continue to threaten Israel, both rhetorically, obviously, and with all those proxies I just mentioned, right? All fair to say?
All fair to say, except it's interesting that we should point out that their proxies are getting their asses kicked or have disappeared.
Well, I wanted to get to that as a result of Israel. I mean, Israel has executed a very effective strategy against all of these proxies, especially obviously, well, all of them, with Hezbollah now in Syria and the pressures they put to bear there, whatever control they had there, obviously. And they've done tremendous damage, and they've weakened all of these threats that have been posed against Israel for most Israelis' lifetimes. They've been at battle with them, at war with them. They weakened them. They weakened then Iran, and then they then went even further and attacked Iran with, I think, when we look back on it, a military attack that will be seen as kind of decapitating their ability to fight back Iran's. And go ahead.
Well, and so that's the point, though, right? Israel's successes, by the way, have not been necessarily clean or the result of Israeli, not all of them, have been the result of Israeli foresight and planning. Gaza, you could say, yes, they've crushed Hamas, but that's because they left themselves open to one of the worst attacks ever in Gaza on the Israeli state. So, I think I have great respect for the Israeli government's ability to conduct operations. Tactically, they're geniuses, but they strategically were morons with Gaza and Hamas. They helped create Hamas's rule there and paid for it terribly in the end, right? In two ways that are going to damage the Israeli state forever, by the way. As far as Lebanon went, that operation was great. They did an amazing job there. But what have they really? Oh, and so that gets us to a point. Like, the U.S. was in nuclear talks under the Trump administration 3 weeks ago with Iran, and they were making progress. So did Israel attack because they needed to force Iran to the negotiating table? No.
What do you think?
Well, Iran was already weakened. Iran had already gotten hurt.
No, they were already at the, go ahead.
So the point being that it's not that Israel was conducting this operation because they were like, hey, we're under greater threat than we were last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. They were much less threat than they were then. They did it because they felt like, oh, my enemy is weak and I can come in and kick him in the nuts one last time. That's why they did it. There's no strategic bigger picture going on there other than that. And of course, what that did by us letting the Israelis take advantage of the talks process to kill a bunch of Iranian leadership is that now the Iranians have no reason to ever trust us ever again. They're now always going to look at us as a totally dishonest interlocutor who will not stick. We ripped up the JCPOA. We tricked them on this attack on Israel. Then we jumped in kind of like, we're like the 6-foot kid in 7th grade whose 4-foot tall buddy beats somebody up. And then he's like, oh, this is awesome. And he jumps in and throws a couple punches himself because his shorter buddy has knocked somebody down. Right. It's just an utterly pathetic mentality. And so like below the level that the U.S. should be operating on.
Well,
the big point being that, like, again, yes, you could say Israel's surrounded by all these enemies and it's done all these things to stop them. Well, what did this accomplish? Like, what actually was accomplished by attacking Iran this time? Other than totally making sure the Iranians never trust the U.S. again. They knocked out a bunch of terrible Russian anti-air defenses that everybody knew was shit anyway.
I think the Israelis and the Americans would say what it accomplished was it prevented Iran from getting a nuclear weapon within.
Let's go to that, because that's a really good point. So Iran has centrifuges to make all this highly enriched uranium. Well, they hit Fordow, they hit Isfahan. They didn't even touch the even bigger, gigantic centrifuge factory near Natanz. We're not even sure how much they damaged in Fordow and Isfahan. So we don't even know if we've even significantly hurt Iran's ability to create highly enriched uranium. We don't know that. And the U.S. is being a little like, well, we're assessing. The Pentagon's saying we're assessing it. If they knew they crushed it, they would say it. That's number one. Number two, they were moving highly enriched uranium out of these facilities for the week before it happened, when the Iranians knew what was going on.
There is some reporting on that, but how sure can we be that they would?
I know for a fact the IAEA knew. Knew before this began that there were 902 pounds of highly enriched uranium missing already, like 4 weeks ago, that had vanished. I got to tell you, you can move highly enriched uranium in what basically those soda kegs, those metal soda kegs that you see in a restaurant.
Yeah.
You can move uranium in those, and they weigh 50 pounds, and you can move them around the country however you want to, in trucks, cars, whatever. It's a guarantee that we don't know where all of Iran's highly enriched uranium is. It's guaranteed. It's 100%, because the facilities got bombed. What better way to hide moving stuff than, hey, everything got bombed, you must have blown it up? I don't know. So, and this is what I get at, where Israel can never now be sure. Can never be sure. And there could be 30 Iranian scientists working in some lab that's supposed to be mechanical engineering lab, and they could be making a nuclear weapon. They like delivery systems. Iran has missiles, they have artillery, they have a really, what people don't realize is that the Shah of Iran himself in the 1950s is the one who started this program by sending a bunch of engineers to MIT. This is not a new thing. Iran having nukes predates the Ayatollahs by a significant amount. In fact, the Shah was far more into having them than the Ayatollahs are. So this is not, there's an infrastructure, there's a mindset, and now, of course, there's an obvious gigantic grievance amongst people who would not normally have loved the regime, but they're, you're an Iranian. If the Iranians assassinated, the vice president, would you and I be saying, hey, great? No, we'd be like, motherfuckers, we hate the guy, but he's our vice president. And I think that, we're in a situation where we're overstating, the White House and the Israelis are overstating the damage done. When you read carefully, you realize it's not clear we damaged it all that much. They are completely ignoring the fact that there's a bunch of highly enriched uranium now that will never be tracked. And they're ignoring the fact that it's much easier to hide like an actual weapons program, particularly when you're going to have a lot of Iranians who say, Iranians who might have cooperated with the Israelis before are not going to anymore because their country got attacked so obviously.
Most American voters, we could talk about Israel, but let's talk about America. Most American voters are only going to buy a pretty simple narrative that's very believable, that our president gave a brave order to send brave members of our military to bomb Iran.
Yep.
And this risky mission and risky decision, something almost equivalent to Obama going after bin Laden. Right. And they're going to say President Trump ended Iran's ability to get a nuclear weapon. And then he brought all the region together in his Truth Social post, and he should be given the Nobel Prize. He's going to, I fear, get a lot of credit for this operation that might have just been sending missiles into the side of a mountain that did very little and was low risk because they had nothing to shoot back. And, just dropping bombs.
He might get some support for this in the short term. I don't think it's that super important in the long run at all, or even the medium term, because I think it's going to become pretty clear pretty quickly. And I will point out, by the way, only 5% or 15% of Americans, something like that, wanted a war with Iran. 85% did not.
But no one's going to call it a war with Iran. This isn't a war.
But
it was a bombing strike is all it was.
Okay, but think about what the Iranians read in that. right? This is why you don't do these things unless you really want to go for it.
No, but I'm just talking about why does it matter what the Iranians think? I'm talking about domestic politics. I'm talking
Now
about
the Iranians know it's very unlikely to happen again with the U.S. involved. It's very unlikely. We shot our bolt. Trump did it. It's clear that regular Americans really are not up for it. And the Iranians are going to be aware of that. And I will tell you, it wouldn't shock me a bit if the Iranians for the next year or two make a lot of conciliatory noises. But that doesn't have anything to do with like the strategic facts on the ground and what they're going to want to do with the facts at hand. And
what are they going to want to do? What are you saying their motivation?
They have to build for themselves a reasonable amount of regime and national security. They have to. And that's going to drive everything.
You're not talking about counterattacks or funding proxies or sleeper cells or turning off my air conditioner. You're talking about they're going to do whatever they can to adapt to get a nuclear weapon. And what are the chances, by the way, that they could just buy one? Why don't they just buy one on Amazon? Like the Russians apparently are saying, you know what, we'll give them one. Like Medvedev
said that, who is just a drunk and an outsider, and I wouldn't take him very seriously. But I know, right? I mean, well, it takes one to know one. I would say that no one's going to give you a nuke because nuclear material has a signature. And so if I give you a nuke and it's full of uranium from Omsk or somewhere, people are going to know where it came from. If it's Pakistani, they're going to know where it came from.
I didn't know they could do that.
It's got like a fingerprint. Yeah. I mean, when Chernobyl blew up, they knew where it was from pretty quickly by the particular whatever isotopes or whatever. So no one's going to give that to you. There are rumors that basically Pakistan would give one to the Saudis if they wanted it because the Saudis like maybe paid for the Pakistani program. But I think I'm not sure if that's true anymore. I've heard it. And I believe it when I see it, basically.
So that's yeah, you're talking about how one country could acquire a bomb from another country. So it doesn't work.
If you're in the nuclear club, every other nation added to the club weakens your position.
What does this mean for the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which was signed a very long time ago and which has been in place for our whole life? Israel's not signed it, but Iran has, and I believe, and much of the rest of almost every other country in the world has. And I mean, what do I need to understand about that treaty and how important it was, what it actually did, and what it would mean if it were ignored or torn up?
The Non-Proliferation Treaty worked when the United States was the guarantor. In other words, if Indonesia decided to build nukes so it could nuke Australia, the United States was there to stand in and say, oh, no. We're going to mess with you. We're going to hurt your ability to build it. We're going to work with you to get rid of it. And if you ever use it on anybody, God help you because we'll be there to respond. South Africa had a very extensive nuclear weapons program, which they literally just gave up. They just handed it in. And it was because the United States put its entire effort and diplomatic ability behind making sure that they couldn't find a use for it and that it was problematic for them in too many ways. The Trump administration doesn't care. I mean, they're going to say, oh, we don't want nukes. Nobody should get nukes. But, if you're Japan being told that they have to now spend 5% of their GDP on defense, which is a ludicrous percentage, if you're Japan, why not just get nukes and cut it to 2% and tell the United States to go fuck themselves? Right. Like, I mean, South Korea, places that are under serious threat that have high technological ability and have a neighbor like China, for example. If you're Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, I mean, getting nukes is an obvious thing to do if the United States is no longer dependable. European countries, Poland, obvious thing to do. Turkey, obvious thing to do. Whether they'll do it or not, we'll see. But I think this has been one of the biggest and worst moments in non-proliferation in modern history, because this is just, showing that Israel has impunity because it's got nukes in a lot of ways, and Iran, because it doesn't, can get stomped on at the will of some clown in the White House who just wanted to drop some big bombs and get a polling bump out of it.
You really think that's what this was in the end? I mean, I don't think it was. I think that he believes whatever Netanyahu tells him, and Netanyahu tells him how great of a threat Iran is. I'm sure Netanyahu or whoever talks to him, whoever wants to convince Trump of anything, we all know that they sketch it out for what it's going to look like for him politically. And they say something like, you're going to look amazing once you do this. You win every which way. Like, Netanyahu must talk to him that way.
So Bibi tried this in the first term, tried to get Trump to do all kinds of things. Trump didn't do it. This term, I think Trump, A, doesn't have the professionals around him like he did.
Right.
A. But B, I think that this Trump is also knows he's on his last term.
Iranian general Soleimani, he did that.
True. But there's also, but that actually.
We thought that was crazy at the time. We thought that was going to start.
I didn't think it was that crazy. I didn't like it, but I thought it was destabilizing. But Soleimani was a guy who did assassinations of political figures. Like, he gave those orders. I got that one. I didn't love it, but I got it. Soleimani was a player, and he paid the price for that. This is fundamentally very different. And, look at it. And there's reporting, by the way, that Trump wasn't going to get involved, and then got all wee-weed up when it looked like it was a spectacular event happening. When the Israelis were hitting and knocking things to shit, Trump was kind of like, yeah, excellent. Like, let's get in on this. I don't underestimate what a boy he is, what a child he is, because there's no strategic logic to this in the long run at all. And you're going to hear a lot of people in the media kind of making up reasons why it makes sense. I hate to say it, but like 10 years from now, you and I are going to talk about this and go, man, that was bad. And it led to a lot of other things. But too late now. We have I called it social media World War I. That's what we're in.
What do you mean by that?
This is driven by the clicks and by the perception of rah-rah that he's getting from social media.
What is the perception that you think is out there anywhere?
You
measure it.
But I get people that aren't talking to me right now because I have said this to them in private, because on social media, they're hearing like, no, this is amazing. We destroyed their ability to make nukes, right? Like, the actual realities of what was done, both offensively and in its effect, don't exist for most people. They're here, particularly for the MAGA people. They're just hearing, we hit this country, they're bad.
Yeah, right.
This is great. And so it's a social media war. It's for Trump to go, look what I did. It's idiocracy at its worst. And that's why it's a social media war. This isn't about what really changed or what was really affected. Trump literally did it. They dropped the bombs, and then they literally immediately went to the Iranians and said, okay, let's just stop there. Like, we just did that, but backsies, like, let's whatever. That's utterly insane. Why?
What else would they do? I mean, why is that not a good strategy?
It's a stupid strategy because you just attacked them. And what you would do if you've really hurt them and you've really gotten a position where you can extract something from them, you say, okay, that was round one. We can keep going unless you do A, B, C, and D, right? You have a position of advantage. You hold on to it. Trump is signaling immediately like, whoa, I'm backfilling. It's a little bit too much like real war. And the Iranians are going to know this. Like, everyone's like treating this like the Iranians are stupid. They're not. They're incredibly smart. And again, they're extremists that run that country, but they're smart extremists. And they're going to see this for what it is. They're going to fight their corner well, and they're going to end up they'll do a fig leaf. I guarantee you, they'll do some sort of fig leaf. And the Israelis will have to go along because the Israelis can't just invade Iran. And in the end, I think Iran ends up with a bomb anyway.
Well, that would be the worst case scenario, I guess, and maybe a likely one. What are you seeing in American media or not seeing that you'd like to see? Who do you like? Who do you trust? I saw James Fallows, who I love, say if you watch the BBC right now, you'll see the difference in the kind of and style of reporting. I don't know what he meant by that. I have a good idea, but what are you, in terms of the reporting around this, what are you seeing that's getting, that's good, that's bad, anywhere?
What Fallows meant was that BBC reporting was factual. If you watch CNN, like CNN had one headline, which was like, America is pulled back into war in the Middle East. Like, no. We decided to jump in. Like, the sort of Iraq war style nonsense, rah-rah in the media
Yeah.
with even less fucking evidence was like back in full force this week, just amazingly. I'll give you a great example. What I'm telling you about highly enriched uranium just was reported in the New York Times this afternoon. So we've been at this for a week, and everyone's known who bothers to read about it that at least 902 pounds of it were gone before the bombing started. And so realistically, if there's missing highly enriched uranium, and you can't bomb it, then you're not stopping a nuclear program. That should have been number one in every media story before the bombs were dropped, because that's just the truth of it. And that didn't even come up. The New York Times kind of did this like, ooh, we just talked to a specialist, and here's the thing to think about. It should have been the first thing. Are we talking? The bombing is to stop their program. Well, we didn't bomb anything that's going to stop their program.
What else are you seeing like that they pulled back in the war? Anything else that you're seeing? By the way, I saw all the old guard come back in full force. It's David Frum, it's Bill Kristol, it's John Bolton on CNN today. I saw John Bolton on CNN.
And I got to tell you, I have much greater respect for Frum and Kristol than I used to, because they're right about democracy in America for sure.
They're part of the pro-democracy movement, no doubt about it.
And I'll take a wide range of allies in that.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But when you read these guys talking about this.
But they should not be asked for their opinion. They should not be talking about the Middle East. They should be sitting back and watching other people talk about it. They should not be invited. John Bolton should not be invited to talk about Iran. The man.
I've got a better one. Petraeus was asked for his opinion. David Petraeus, who gave secret documents to his mistress, who totally screwed up the war in Afghanistan, lost it, along with a bunch of other generals.
Nobody could have won it, to be fair.
No, but he helped. Like, he didn't just lose it, but he claimed he was winning it.
Well, right? They all did. Every single general claimed they were winning.
But this is my point. Like, in American history in the past, if you were a general and you didn't win, it was bye-bye, see you later, and you never heard from the guy again. Well, we seem in modern American history now to be like lionizing people who couldn't win. Like, I'm sorry if the war was hard.
None of these people should be. No, none of the American military. Yeah, it's.
I'm sorry the war was hard, but I still don't think that means I should have to listen to your opinion if you didn't do something extraordinary to win it. Like the guy who fought in crazy gun battles in the streets of Fallujah, extraordinary and amazing. But a general who sat in an office and made up coin doctrine that was completely bullshit, and then claimed to be a strategic genius. I don't want to hear from that guy. And
absolutely, fully agree. The point is, all of these people are the ones that are invited on to talk. Where all of the voices who, by the way, plenty of military experts that are anti-war. A guy whose name I never forgotten. I should reach out to him. Is named Daniel Bolger. He wrote a book called Why We Lost, a general's inside account of why we lost the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. I thought that man was, not to mention our old friend Congressman Walter B. Jones, people who realized that they were wrong and admitted it. Like, these guys still think that they were right about Iraq, or that if they had fought it differently, it could have won, or Afghanistan. And now they're being invited on to talk on TV. It's a disgrace.
Well, and I'll tell you something. I know generals that fought in the surge in Afghanistan. And what they will tell you is that anybody who was any general officer, any significant officer who went into the surge, if you asked them while they were there, do you honestly think this is going to do any good? As somebody put it to me, anyone who's not one general put it to me, anyone who's not a fucking idiot knew that it was a waste of time.
Yeah.
So really, Petraeus is not so much a general as a really good self-marketer.
I was at an event. I was hosting the gala for the Iraq and Afghanistan Fund of America. It was 2 days after the election this past November, and I was in bad shape. I also had a infamous evening on CNN that night with Scott Jennings too. But that night,
more of you.
That night at the Iraq and Afghan veterans event, Petraeus is there because he's on the board, and he went up and he gave his speech, and he's on behind the podium, and then there's a picture of him up to the right, and it's an old picture, Bill, and he looks, well, younger. And so when I got back up to the mic, I just went off. I go, let's just talk about the elephant in the room. How old was that picture? And
Nice.
what do you do for your skin? And am I going to see my family again? You know,
Right.
like giving him a little. I was like, are you gonna rendition me out of here now for those jokes? And or do I, you know? And because I was really
Yeah.
hoping to network with you and get your business card. And he walks up to the stage and hands me his business card. So he did not rendition me in the end.
Yeah. He just gave top secret documents to his biographer / mistress. What a guy. Yeah. I'd have trouble being nice to him, frankly.
Oh yeah, no, me too. I mean, that's why I took that shot and to his face. I mean, I wasn't going to be, you know, I wasn't going to speak truth to power that night at that very important event.
No.
Stand in my, you know, but I was going to give him a little ribbing about
Sure.
his care regime. All right, I'll let you go. Are you going to join us at our hangout tonight?
Oh yeah, I'm going to try to. I'm busy running crazy all day. Been in like 3 different cities, and now I'm eating my wife's lovely noodles, and I will try to pop in.
I want some of your wife's lovely noodles.
She's a great cook. She's an amazing cook. Yeah.
We're talking about her cooking still.
I'd talk about cooking all day.
So we're talking about her cooking. Your wife's. It was innuendo. I'll let you go.
Oh, you dirty bastard!
Yeah.
Awesome.
And praise be. May the Lord open. Thanks for doing this with me. Appreciate you very much. And if you're just watching randomly on YouTube, come on our hangout. Join us.
Cool.
To be a subscriber, but go over to patreon.com/PeteDominic and you can hang out with Bill and ask him any questions, challenge him, make fun of him, whatever you want. We always have a good time. I will see you later. Thanks, Bill.
Cheers. Bye.